It's an extremely proud moment for me and a very privileged moment for me to be here with you on this very pristine occasion to deliver a memorial lecture on Baba Saheb, Dr. Ambedkar. At the same time, I can't stop but be very nostalgic today, since I was a student in this very university, and I did my MSc in life sciences, and at the same time I was taught in this university in this very lecture hall complex, and in those lecture rooms we learned the very initial ideas of how to be a research student. University of Hyderabad, as it started, was not to be or not to become another ordinary university. It was destined and privileged to be one of the most prestigious and most focused research-oriented university. When we joined as students in the MSc here, it was not another routine classes. They were looking for future scientists, future researchers, and people with the scientific acumen to go ahead in their careers and their future life. It was that kind of an environment and atmosphere here. That is where I grew up, and today amongst us I have my contemporaries, C.H. Dwarka Thirumal Rao, who is now a police administrator, and he was my colleague, and my senior Jannu Lakshminarayan Garu. So why I tend to be nostalgic today is on basically two issues. One, how the University of Hyderabad has contributed to the growth of an individual like me, of everybody here. That is the beauty, that is the nature of this university, and that is how the university has grown up and grown over the years to be so. And at the same time, the focus, the seriousness of being a research student, being the one who is trying to probe the truth, trying to understand the various philosophies, the various sciences. And again, I am proud, privileged to be telling you here that me and Dwarka Thirumal Rao were the first occupants of the hostel A. So this is about the nostalgic issues here. Before I move on to the formal memorial lecture, which is already in printed form with you, I need to tell you that this lecture or the study comes out of, again, the life experiences of mine as an administrator. As an administrator, when I was, say, sub-collector, additional collector, or even district collector, how a democracy works at the grassroots and why it works so. When we entered the administrative service, we entered with a lot of ideas about bringing change in the society and trying to develop and take this country ahead as one of the greatest nations. So as an IAS officer, as an administrator, I was going through the working of the democracy. I stumbled upon certain aspects of political representation. The idea of political representation, I didn't know at that time how it emanated, how it evolved, and how it consolidated into a constitutional form. And then in a democracy, it's the political representation That is the most important aspect where the country runs or the people address their grievances and move ahead through the representative character of the political representatives. They elect and send to the assemblies and parliament, even the municipal Panchayat Raj institutions and urban institutions. Now, for our country, the representation of untouchables, now called scheduled caste, is a very unique aspect when we compare it with the other nations and other societies. So how this representation aspect came about and why the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes have separate constituencies reserved for them, and what is expected of the political representatives who win elections, who represent those constituencies in the parliament and the assemblies. There is an entire aspect of democracy for us here. The democracy is about through the parliamentary system we have, of the representative character and the aspect of representation by the elected representatives. Our democracy was questioned recently by certain groups, and at the same time everybody had to remember Baba Sahib Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, about his contribution, about the resilience of the Indian Constitution, about his contribution. And that is how, as a very unique country, as a unique society where we have multi-caste, multi-linguistic and multi-regional aspects coming into influencing the growth of the country and the development of this nation, we need to really understand Baba Sahib's role. This is exactly where I will try and talk in the lecture. Now, trying to understand this question at the grassroots level, I stumbled upon an incident. I need to explain that incident to you today so as to contextualize the lecture. I was posted as additional collector in a Kurukshetra, in a district called Kurukshetra, and I was also the Chief Executive Officer of District Rural Development Authority. I was implementing several schemes for the poor people, including the scheduled caste of that area. There was an incident in a village in that particular district where the scheduled caste of that village wanted to construct a small temple for Guru Ravidas. Guru Ravidas is a guru, very revered and saint of the medieval period, where the scheduled castes in North India have temples of him. So when the scheduled caste of that particular village went to the Sarpanch and asked for a piece of land that they want to construct a temple for Guru Ravidas, so the Sarpanch agreed and the scheduled caste of that village started constructing a temple. Meanwhile, the another dominant social group of that village went and opposed such construction in the village common land or the panchayat land. So there was a tiff. The dominant caste group community of that village one fine evening demolished that temple. So thereby there emanated a problem between the dominant community of that village and the scheduled caste. Now the scheduled castes of that village reacted and they protested in a way that they boycotted to work. You say, one can say that they striked work. They said that they will not work in the fields as agricultural laborers in that particular community's lands. So now again the dominant community reacted. They boycotted the scheduled caste. This happens in our country. The dominant community called Sainis, they boycotted the scheduled caste. They said no water, no rations to be given to them, etc. All those. Now the district collector, this particular boycott was going on, and the district collector asked me to visit that village. I had an opportunity. I went there. I looked at that situation. And being an officer at that time who was implementing certain schemes, apart from the administrative issues of the boycott, where administration gives a separate ration shop and separate provisions for the boycotted community, I went around the village, saw their houses. They had poor thatched houses. I said, okay, I will grant you Indira Awas Yojana houses. So that was the scheme I had. So I granted those houses. And in that area, the scheduled caste of that particular village were able to get reasonable income. So when I granted Indira Awas Yojana to them, that was about 20,000 rupees in those days. The scheduled castes put in more money and they converted their poor houses into beautiful residences. They put in more money, they borrowed more money apart from the 20,000 rupees I gave them. And after a few months, they invited me to go to the village. And I went there. I can see beautiful houses. Very beautiful houses constructed. Now here comes the MLA of that area. That area falls under a constituency called Rador. And the MLA's name was Bantaram Balmiki, and it was a reserved constituency, and the MLA was a scheduled caste. He came to me one day and he protested, saying that why did you grant the Indira Awas Yojana to the scheduled caste of that village? I was shocked. I was surprised to the core, and I asked him, I have done the correct thing. I have done the correct thing. I thought as per that scheme, the people who are suffering from the atrocities are the first people to be given Indira Awas Yojana scheme. And how can you oppose it despite being a reserved MLA, a scheduled caste yourself? He said, no. He went on arguing with me. He said, what you have done is not correct. You should not have given money to them. That sent me really thinking about the representative character of that particular MLA, because he was under pressure from the dominant community not to support the scheduled caste, who himself was a scheduled caste, not to support the scheduled caste during this agitation. This brings the entire question of political representation. Now I will bring you to more contemporary issue. It happened about a few months ago. There was a bill in the Parliament on the constitutional amendment to bring in reservation in promotion. It became a very controversial bill. There was political parties taking positions. There are two parties in the Uttar Pradesh called Bahujan Samaj Party and another party called Samajwadi Party. Samajwadi Party opposed the reservation in promotion bill. It opposed in Rajya Sabha, it opposed in Lok Sabha. Now Samajwadi Party has 22 MPs. 10 of the MPs are from scheduled caste reserved constituencies. 22, 10 of them. So all the 10 were opposing this bill, including the 22. Not only opposing this bill, when the bill was passed in Rajya Sabha and it moved to the Lok Sabha, a scheduled caste reserved constituency elected member of parliament rushed to the well of the parliament and pulled off the bill from the hands of the minister and took it away when the amendment was moved in Lok Sabha. And he went to his area and the rest of the MPs caught hold of that bill and tore it off. Again, it brings us to that same question of the political representative character of MPs and MLAs who get elected from reserved constituencies. Now again, we can bring it to a wider context where the very representative characters of our MLAs and MPs, are they representing the people? Are they representing the issues of the people? How often they represent? Whether they are successful in such a kind of a representation? These issues have probed me. I have used my 22-year administrative experience. I conducted elections. I was observing elections. And as an observer under the Election Commission of India, I got an opportunity to tour the entire nation and try and understand certain aspects of our democracy. Now, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's role in bringing the aspect of representation. It is a very, very important and crucial role in creating an electoral system for our country, then bringing it to the constitution, and the very aspect of political representation. It is not merely about scheduled caste. It is about the representation of the people through their political representatives. That what made me to study this aspect, and that is what I am going to present before you in the form of a lecture. And I hope we will find answers and we will find further probe into this aspect of the very democracy, the pillars of democracy, where the political representation takes the country ahead. And I commence my lecture here. Election was the first political tool that provided Indians the right to freely express their concerns in a legal framework. This ignited a chain of events that ultimately led to the inclusion of Indian representatives from all sections of society in the decision-making process. Starting with the nomination of a person of Indian origin in the Governor General's Council in 1861, the system soon reached to an arrangement of separate electorates, limited only for the Muslims, through the Morley-Minto reforms in 1909. The repressed classes, that means the untouchables, today called the scheduled caste, also had started pressing for their representation in the legislative bodies since 1917, but it was not given serious consideration until the advent of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, a Columbia, London educated untouchable leader who brought the issue of political representation of depressed classes slowly yet firmly in the mainstream discourse. Ambedkar questioned the representative character of the electoral system as developed by the British and started arguing for arranging better opportunities for the untouchables. Presenting evidences before the Southborough Committee in 1919, Ambedkar asked alike Muslims demanded separate electorates for the depressed classes. However, the South Borough Committee did not accept this and instead provided with an option of nominating members from the depressed classes in each provincial legislature in the Government of India Act 1919. For the Congress, the demand for separate electorates by the depressed classes, though was creating worries, it opted to remain indifferent until Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi emerged on Indian political scene. However, Gandhi's approach to this issue was very different than of Ambedkar. Gandhi believed that social reform should precede political reform, and therefore he started his campaign against untouchability by extending his support to the Vaikom temple entry Satyagraha in Travancore in 1924-25. He believed that if there is something that needs to be changed, it is the behavior of the upper caste towards the untouchables. And therefore, he preferred appeal against antagonism. On the contrary, Ambedkar believed in pressing for equal rights and emancipation of the social and economic condition of the untouchables by marching towards their empowerment. Thus, the two leaders always remained diametrically opposed to each other, and the issue of political representation of untouchables remained highly contested. In 1927, when the British appointed a statutory commission, popularly known as the Simon Commission, to undertake constitutional review without any Indian member, Ambedkar applauded it by saying that, quote, by their non-appointment, the depressed classes are at any rate saved from the prejudices that would have otherwise caused to their case. The early attempts of Ambedkar, presenting before the Simon Commission in Pune on 23rd October 1928, Ambedkar replying to a question as to what is that you want to represent as the proper way in which the Constitution of India should deal with these untouchable people. He said, I would submit that as a matter of demand for political protection, we claim representation on the same basis as Mohammedan minority. We claim reserved seats if accompanied by adult franchise. And when asked if there is no adult franchise, he added, we would ask for separate electorates. Later, when British organized Roundtable Conference in London in 1930-32, Ambedkar raised the issue of separate electorates for the untouchables once again. The Congress representatives, including Gandhi, opposed it on the ground it would disintegrate the Hindu society. With the growing interest and rapidly changing attitude of the Muslims towards the problems of untouchables, as expressed openly at the Simla delegation in 1906, it had become important for caste Hindu leaders to keep untouchables within the Hindu fold for larger political numbers. In 1909, Muslims took the bold step of suggesting that depressed class should not be enrolled in the census as Hindus. In fact, much of the jealousy developed among the Hindus for the Muslims was believed to be arisen out of the fear that the latter might add to its numbers by converting depressed classes. This was evident even in the address of the Congress President in 1923. The quarrels about alams and peepal trees and musical procession are truly childish. But there is one question which can easily furnish a ground for complaint of unfriendly action if communal activities are not amicably adjusted. It is a question of the conversion of suppressed classes if Hindu society does not speedily absorb them. More interestingly, even Gandhi felt that untouchable would make a common cause with Muslims in opposing Hindus. Thus, while arguing this case at the Minorities Committee meeting on 13 November 1931 at the Roundtable Conference in London, Gandhi opposed Ambedkar's idea of separate electorate to the untouchables and stated with all emphasis that I can command that if I was the only person to resist this thing, I would resist it with my life. Having forced to close the roundtable conference, the British Prime Minister appointed a consultation committee chaired by Lord Lothian, who toured India in early 1932, gathered census material and the demands of the different groups of the country. Ambedkar once again presented his demand for separate electorate before this committee. Agreeing with Ambedkar's contention, the British government awarded separate electorates to the untouchables on 16th August 1932. Sticking to his words, Gandhi started his fast unto death from Yarwada jail, where he was lodged in Pune then. This led to the creation of tremendous pressure on Ambedkar, and he finally had to agree upon giving up his demand. An agreement was reached between the representatives of caste Hindus and Ambedkar at Pune, famously known as Pune Pact, which altered the provisions of the communal award by replacing separate electorate by reserved seats in joint or undifferentiated electorates. This attempt by Gandhi was less an agreement about giving due representation to the untouchable communities in electoral process, but more about showcasing Dalits or scheduled castes as a part of Hinduism. It critically altered the method of electing a scheduled caste representative from a system of separate electorates, making the non-scheduled caste voters the prime deciding factor in the election. The two-stage election was envisaged in the Pune Pact, faced immediate criticism from Ambedkar, and he started demanding for alteration of the electoral method. Ambedkar opined that Pune Pact, though increased the number of quota of seats for the untouchables, it took away the right to double vote. This increase in seats in no way a justifiable compensation for the loss of double vote. I quote, "The second vote given by communal award was a priceless privilege. Its value as a political weapon was beyond reckoning." He therefore soon met Gandhi on 23rd April 1933 to propose some changes in Pune Pact. Ambedkar proposed to do away with the panel system and the process of double election, which involved primary and secondary elections, consider the cost involved in two elections on the depressed class candidates. Instead, he suggested that there should be only a single election and that no candidate contesting for a depressed class seat, that is scheduled caste reserved seat, should be declared elected unless he secured at least 25% of the votes of depressed class voters. This can be understood in two ways. Firstly, he converted the panel of 4 to be elected from the primary election, which was agreed in Pune Pact, into percentage terms. In other words, that meant if there were 100 depressed class votes in primary election, they were equally divided. Each candidate would get 25%, since there are 4% to be elected in the primary election solely by the depressed class voters. Secondly, it also eliminated worthless candidates who would otherwise walk into the secondary election, even though they secured very small number of votes. If the Hindus so decide, they can certainly elect worthless candidates, even though they have failed to secure good number of votes in the primary election. Since Ambedkar's original proposal for number of candidates to be selected in primary election was 2, he feared that the very low number of voters available from depressed class communities, there was a likelihood that 4 or less candidates could be contesting in primary election, and all of them would easily walk into the secondary election. The process of voting as per the proposal of Ambedkar has further meaning. In this crucial proposal, in a single election, the voters of the depressed classes and general category would vote for depressed class candidate in 2 separate ballot boxes. the votes of the depressed class voters would be counted first, and candidates securing less than 25% would be automatically eliminated. The votes of the general category would be then counted and added to these candidates, to those candidates who have qualified by getting more than 25% votes. It was very unlikely that one candidate would have become eligible for the next level, as depressed classes candidate would need at least 76% of the votes from his community. The cases of fractured voting, where no depressed class candidate secured more than 25 votes from the community, the top two candidates will be selected for their votes from the general category will be added up. Out of these two, one who secures the highest number of votes, combining both depressed class votes and the general votes, would be declared elected. The pact in no way was an attempt to address the issue of representation of the scheduled castes. In the House of Lords at London, discussing on the non-seriousness of the Pune Pact, the Secretary of the State for India, he recorded, I quote, "The method of election in the case of scheduled castes under that part of communal award, which is known as Pune Pact, was no part of original communal award of His Majesty's government. It was an agreement come to among Indians themselves. No official, and indeed no Englishman, had any part in framing of the agreement. I was never myself an ardent admirer of the Pune Pact. The agreement was reached, as your lordships will remember, under the threat of a fast unto death by Mr. Gandhi. And my fears with regard to the results have been that apparently simple document, as a matter of fact, raises questions of great difficulty. Take for example a panel of 4 candidates. Was the panel of 4 to be the maximum or the minimum? Then again, after the primary election, assuming that 4 candidates had been elected, were withdrawals to be allowed? Shall a man who has been elected to be permitted to withdraw before the final election takes place? Gandhi, however, did not accept the fact that the pact was done in haste and pressure, and refused to accept Ambedkar's proposal outrightly. It should also be remembered that the Pune Pact, despite talking about joint electorate, did not talk about double or multi-member constituencies, where 2 members would stand from the same constituencies. It was the Government of India Act 1935 which, in addition to fulfilling the spirit underlying the Pune Pact, also accommodated the demands of Ambedkar and introduced the idea of multi-member constituencies with cumulative voting system. In other words, it rewarded back the electors of reserved constituencies, both general and scheduled caste, as many votes as there would be seats, that one could give either in one bunch for one candidate or spread them about as many votes he has among several candidates. Explaining the reason for choosing the system over simple voting, the House of Lords recorded that it will broaden the choice of the elector and it will tend to break down those boundaries of caste and creed which are the basis of all India difficulties. But Ambedkar knew that this attempt by the British would be not of much use. Given the political conditions and the electoral method, the scheduled caste representatives elected to the legislative bodies could not be the true representatives of the community, and the objective of enabling them to ventilate the grievances and obtain redressal from the government would remain unfulfilled. And therefore, he continued his efforts to rectify the provision. To sustain his argument further, Dr. Ambedkar wrote a detailed treatise supporting by the statistical data of the 1937 elections in his book, What Congress and Gandhi Have Done to Untouchables. In the analysis, Ambedkar succeeded in showing that only 18% of the votes polled by untouchables were in favor of Congress and 82% were against Congress. Congress won only 78 scheduled caste reserved seats, whereas other parties managed to capture 73. The 78 seats that Congress won was with a majority of votes other than of the untouchables. Ambedkar also said the Congress treated scheduled caste legislators as drum-driven cattle. For a casual leader, his analysis might sound nothing more than an ingenious attempt to delegate the Congress performance in the primary elections, but there is lot more meaning to it when studied in a legal framework of the electoral methods. Ambedkar was arguing that Congress did not represent the untouchables as the candidate chosen by the untouchable voters in the primary election had been rejected by the general voters in the secondary election. This he also effectively proved by using the principle of simple majority by calculating the combined strength of Congress party in the provincial assemblies and councils. Only 10% of the people were granted right to vote in 1937 elections, out of which 53% cast their votes against Congress. As a result, Congress secured only 777 seats out of 1758 seats in 1937 election in both assemblies and councils. Since it did not get either 50% of the seats or 50% of the votes, this showed that it was neither a majority party nor did it prove to represent all communities of the country. This situation, he opined, also needed a serious consideration because democracy in the country was still at a nascent form and passing through a process of evolution. In the Constituent Assembly, Ambedkar and Patel got into contestations. When the British formed the Cripps mission to frame a new constitution for India in 1941, it once again did not explicitly recognize depressed classes as a separate element and remained vague as usual with the usage of the term racial and religious minorities. It completely ignored the pleas of depressed classes to have an independent voice in granting political recognition to these classes. Ambedkar opposed the Cripps proposals, saying that, I quote, the scheduled castes are bound hand and foot and handed over to the caste Hindus, unquote. However, 2 years later, when negotiations started again, British this time made specific reference to depressed classes. This disturbed Congress again and started campaigning against it. So forceful was it campaign that British ultimately succumbed to it. The Wavell plan that declared its plan in 1945 with an aim to expand the Executive Council put forward only one post for 50 million scheduled castes. Ambedkar once again opposed this sinister plan, a political arithmetic, and Wavell plan failed. Soon after that, the British formed the Cabinet Mission in June 1945 and made two announcements. One, elections to be held in winter 1945 for the provincial and central legislative assemblies, and two, a constituent assembly by which our constitution is formed. Constituent assembly would be created after elections for framing a new constitution. Interestingly, the Central Legislative Assembly had no reserved seats. The provision of Government of India Act 1935 related to this was never implemented in the Central Legislative Assembly, and thus it had only one nominated member from the scheduled caste category in the Executive Council. Ambedkar thus opposed it once again in a meeting of the Cabinet Mission on 5th April 1946. He produced evidences to show the committee how in several cases Congress scheduled caste candidates were outvoted by scheduled caste federation candidates in primary elections, were beaten in the final elections in 1946, and how small number of scheduled caste voters were terrorized by the loot and arson ensured by the Congress candidates. Soon thereafter, the Scheduled Caste Federation and Ambedkar's leadership in July 1946 launched a satyagraha for the rights of untouchables in Bombay, Pune, Lucknow and Kanpur. The Congress, feeling for a need of a rapprochement, asked Sardar Patel to meet Ambedkar, but it couldn't come to any settlement because the consternation for Sardar Patel, Vallabhbhai Patel, remained confining to criticizing Ambedkar for his attitude towards Gandhi in his writings and speeches. Following the meeting, Ambedkar, however, wrote a letter along with a detailed memorandum to Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel proposing alternatives to Pune Pact, but it remained unheard. Ambedkar's last attempt in this direction was done in the Constituent Assembly, the entry to which was not an easy sail for him. On 15th April 1947, the All India Adi Hindu Depressed Class Association, on behalf of the Scheduled Caste, submitted a memorandum arguing that the system of joint electorates has deprived the Scheduled Caste of true and elective political representation and argued for the abrogation of the Pune Pact. The association also demanded that the representation in the legislature should be done by separate electorates, and if not, then by securing 40% of the total number of Scheduled Caste votes, should be made compulsory for a Scheduled Caste candidate to win the joint electorates election. However, the subcommittee, in its meeting on July 21st, 1947, decided by a majority of 28-3 that there should be no separate elections for the elections to the legislature, and as a matter of principle, there should be reserved seats for the Scheduled Caste. While arriving at this decision, the option of discussing various methods of joint electorate, as suggested by the All India Adi Hindu Depressed Class Association, was left open. The subcommittee also decided that reservation should be for 10 years, the reserved consensus today in this country, and after that the position be reconsidered. However, the decision of electoral method of representation of Scheduled Caste and other minorities based on a polling of some quota of votes from the community before he was declared elected was growing contentious, as the subcommittee got divided by 7 votes on each side and had to refer this matter to advisory committee of the Constituent Assembly. This attracted a considerable discussion even before the advisory committee, but finally K.M. Munshi, with the support of large majority in the committee, moved a resolution that there should not be such a stipulation. This alternative method of electoral representation in a reserved seat was one of the options of the substitution of separate electorates, but this got defeated. Ambedkar knew it since the beginning that despite his strong efforts to bring in settlement on the issue of the electoral method for the selection of Scheduled Caste representatives, the Congress would virtually sweep aside any proposal, facing a situation where Harijan, in quotes, members of the Congress in the Constituent Assembly were not speaking out for the rights of untouchables. Ambedkar at one point of time even thought of dissociating himself from the Constituent Assembly itself. He said this to Siddharth College students, I quote, you should however remember that in the Constituent Assembly of 292 or so, I am one single solitary individual. You should also bear in mind that no matter how great a man may have intellect or the capacity to argue or to defend, he is after all one man, a single individual. If the rest of 291 are determined not to listen to the reason, not to listen to the argument, but to oppose their opponent, you can well realize my possible helplessness in the Constituent Assembly of 292, where I am only one. I unquote. At last, when Ambedkar's demand found a company in Nagappa, his name is Sardar Nagappa, he was a representative from Kurnool. Nagappa's voice on 28th August 1947, who brought in the minimum vote stipulation of 35% of the votes for a qualified joint electorate. Patel, nipping this proposal in the bud, said, Mr. Nagappa wanted to move his amendment to fulfill a promise or undertaking, or at least to show to his community that he was not purchased by the majority community. Well, he has done his job, but other people took him seriously and took a lot of time. This was nipped in the bud. As if it was not all, the advisory committee led by Sardar Patel in May 1948 decided to abolish reservations for minorities, including the scheduled castes. It was at this stage that Ambedkar, the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constitution and also then the Law Minister of India, decided to walk out of the Constituent Assembly. He said, I quote, I have labored for 3 years preparing the Constitution on the cost of my health so that I could do something for the welfare of the scheduled caste. If seats were not kept reserved for the depressed classes in the Constitution, I would walk out of the Constituent Assembly so that in the pages of the history it would remain written that how the Hindus opposed to the question of welfare of untouchables when it came before them. I unquote. Ambedkar went out of the meeting, did not attend the House until Congress agreed to the inclusion of certain provisions for the welfare of untouchables in the Constitution. Later on November 16, 1949, Congress moved a resolution to substitute the word minorities by certain classes and exclude the scheduled caste from the ambit of minority permanently. The amendment was adopted, and with this came the special provision of reservation of seats in the House of the People for the scheduled caste with the Article 330, Clause 1 of the Constitution. The Clause 2 of this Article 330 also provided that the number of seats reserved in any state for the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribes shall bear as nearly as may be the same proportion of the total number of seats allotted to that state in the House of the People as the population of scheduled caste in that state, as case may be, in respect of which seats are so reserved, be as of the total population of the state. Important to mention is the fact that Mahatma Gandhi, the only person other than Ambedkar, albeit in a different frame of mind and plan of action than him, was assassinated on 30th January 1948. Significantly, apart from Gandhi, there was no one in Congress who cared about the question of the rights of scheduled caste. Jawaharlal Nehru had least interest in the affairs of the untouchables, and he barely grasped the issue, any issue regarding untouchables, including Pune Pact, since he was busy as Prime Minister and also not present during the Pune Pact. Sardar Patel, who was a witness to the Pune Pact and who understood the mind of the Mahatma Gandhi, virtually took over the reins of deciding the issues related to minorities and scheduled castes in the post-Pakistan and post-Gandhi India. In less than a month of the tragic assassination of Mahatma Gandhi, the Advisory Committee on Minorities held its crucial meetings under the leadership of Sardar Patel, who by then was known to have held his independent views different from the Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, and who on decisions made by Patel remained a mere spectator. The reluctance of the Congress leaders for inclusion of political safeguards for the untouchables became evident in the fact that the safeguards were limited for a period of 10 years on the aspect of political representation. The speeches of Patel and Nehru made in the Constituent Assembly on 25th and 26th May 1949, while adopting the motion to abolish reservation of all minorities except scheduled castes reflect the same disposition. The position taken by Ambedkar to ensure the political safeguards for untouchables despite the loss of reservations for minorities was a result of the discussion outside the Constituent Assembly. The Congress's decision to abolish all the reservation and describing them as evil could be seen in many speeches in the Constituent Assembly. The extreme stance to walk out of the Constituent Assembly by Ambedkar might be the reason why Congress leaders gave the concession, albeit reluctantly, for a limited period of 10 years. The Constitution of Republic India completely outlawed the provision for separate electorate for Parliament and state legislatures through Article 325 and made a provision of reservation for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes along with few other categories through Article 330. Neither were seats reserved for scheduled castes in the upper house at the center or states, that is Rajya Sabha or Vidhan Parishad, nor were there any provision for representation in other political bodies. It was left merely at the behest of the state to make special provisions for the backward people within the scope of Article 15(4) of the Constitution. Most importantly, the reservation in political representation was kept subjected to the constitutional limit of 10 years only. The Constitution also changed the electoral method from a two-stage election with a separate electoral roll for the scheduled caste voters for the primary elections as enacted in the 1935 Act to that of a single election based on a common electoral roll. The first casualty of this method was the defeat of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in 1951 and 52 general elections and later by-elections. Few years later, the government abolished the arrangement of double member consensus by the Constitution 8th Amendment on January 5th, 1960. Since all the elections have been conducted under a single member electoral system with the reservation of seats for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe population on the basis of their percentage of population in every state, the single member reserved consensus system has seen several elections in the past 50 years. Since the provision of reserved seats has been continuously extended after every 10 years under the Article 334 of the Constitution. It is evident that electoral method for reserved consensus between the 1931 proposal for separate electorates to the 1961 abolition of double member consensus have kept changing at fast pace. However, in the next 50 years from 1961, it strictly remained a single electoral roll of a joint electorate of both scheduled caste and non-scheduled caste voters and a single member reserved seat. While during the first 40 years, the alternative schemes for separate electorates or for a qualified joint electorate with the stipulation of minimum number of votes to be polled by the winning candidate of his or her own community as demanded by Ambedkar was never agreed upon. In the latter period, there has been hardly anyone in the Parliament who has argued for its continuance, yet it is extended after every 10 years without any debate. The bill to abolish double member consensus was introduced by a private member on the ground of cost, cumbersomeness, confusion among voters, and misunderstanding among the candidates of the same political parties. But the fact of the matter remains that the abolition was inspired principally due to the fear of the general candidate at the hands of reserved candidates. The allocation of reserved seats to one of the two areas of double member consensus turned out to be quite a problem in a number of cases, mainly because of the lack of detailed population figures of small administrative units. In the case of seats reserved for scheduled castes, the Commission began by first reserving constituencies with the highest concentration of scheduled castes, usually not much more than 20%, and then selecting the other by dispersal criteria. Since the scheduled caste population was evenly dispersed, the constituencies reserved for them contained far fewer scheduled caste members. Among the 76 Lok Sabha constituencies reserved for scheduled caste, they nowhere comprised a majority, and only in 13 which they comprised nearly 30%. Most of the scheduled caste constituencies contain between 10 to 30% of scheduled caste, and the vast majority of the SC population, perhaps 75% of them, were left outside the constituencies reserved for them. Of the 111 Lok Sabha constituencies where scheduled caste comprised more than 20% of the population, only 46 were reserved, while 29 constituencies reserved had less than 20% of the population of scheduled caste. Now, in lieu of the conclusion, what I want to tell here is, it is the Gandhi and Ambedkar contestation that has shaped the electoral method of this country. In the initial stages of Gandhi's position was a full denial of any rights for the untouchables. However, when in 1932 he realized that the political representation for untouchables under the Ramsay MacDonald Award, that is communal award, was inevitable, his position shifted to altering the electoral method by which a scheduled caste member was to be elected. The electoral method in contention was the separate electoral method. This was already applied in the case of Muslims in 1909, and it was extended to other minorities in communal award in 1932. Once Gandhi stood steadfast against separate electorate method proposed by Ambedkar, all efforts of Ambedkar during Pune Pact was to secure a method other than a joint electorate method. His focus was to find an electoral method or formula by which the scheduled caste elected representatives of scheduled caste constituency cater to the interests of the scheduled caste. The Pune Pact, which initiated the formula of two-stage election, had elements of both separate and joint electorate, and was a compromise for Ambedkar and a great victory for Gandhi. It was eventually a formula in which the winner was decided by the Hindu majority. The 1937 election analysis by Ambedkar had clearly proved this point, that invariably the candidate whom scheduled caste choose as their number one candidate in the primary election lost in the second stage of joint electorate vote in the stage 2. This was clear enough to prove that whosoever was voted by the majority of untouchables in primary election was deliberately voted out by the caste Hindus in the secondary election. This was Ambedkar's scathing attack, for which he was forced to sign Pune Pact against his will under threat of Gandhi's life on Gandhi. This pitted Congress and the likes of Sardar Patel against Ambedkar and further consolidated Congress opposition to any concession to be provided to the untouchables. In the later stage of 1945, Congress upped the ante against Ambedkar, and in 1946 elections, the Congress election strategist Sardar Patel effectively rooted out the opposition and untouchables to the Congress, including Ambedkar. In such situations, still Ambedkar variantly argued his point at every opportunity, at every negotiation, that scheduled caste representatives have to be elected by such a method that will make such representatives air the grievances of untouchables. The demand for political representation for scheduled caste by Ambedkar had to overcome the resistance of very powerful Gandhi, and therefore he could not argue, he could argue only till a certain point during Pune Pact negotiation. But after Gandhi, people like Sardar Patel even went to the extent of abolishing reservations. Therefore, as the scheduled caste vote for an election to a reserved constituency become irrelevant or least important, thereby the issues related to scheduled caste also become irrelevant for the elected member, bringing you back to Bantaram, Valmiki and Samajwadi Party MPs. Since The upper caste, other backward caste, other non-SC still discriminate and behave in such a manner which proves the oppressive nature of the social relations. The non-SC constituency in a territorial delimited electoral constituency would never like to have a SC representative from a reserved constituency who takes sides of scheduled caste, and would be pleased to have one who toes the line of the non-SC majority of the constituency. Since the election nomination process on every part except few scheduled caste parties is controlled by upper caste, the scheduled caste representative does not even behave in favor of scheduled caste, not only in the legislative body but also in public fora. Tracing the evolution which we went through today of the question of representation that was raised by Ambedkar, it is clear that it is the electoral method that is adopted to elect a scheduled caste representative from a reserved constituency that fails the representative character of the reserved members. A recently conducted survey in 2 states, in Andhra Pradesh and Punjab, about understanding the existing legal framework of electoral methods in implementing the affirmative action in political representation. We are coming to the concluding times of scheduled caste. In short, the representative character of scheduled caste representatives showed some interesting factors. This was the response of the voters, electors. The respondents were the voters in this case. 76.8% of the respondents said no to a question as to whether their MLAs ever raised their issue of Dalits in the Legislative Assembly. 57.6% replied in negative in response to a question whether their MPs have ever raised the issues of Dalits in the Parliament. 49.2% felt that the MLA and MPs do not raise the issue related to the scheduled caste community because they had to depend on other caste voter for their elections. In this particular response, only 27.1 replied negative. Out of those who met and requested an MLA or MP for some work related to scheduled caste community, more than 2/3 felt that the response of MLA MP was negative. Nearly 60% felt that their MLA MP has not helped them in getting basic amenities such as house, water, road, transport for the scheduled caste. 82.5% of the respondents felt that MLA/MP did not help scheduled caste in getting education facilities. 91% felt dissatisfaction with the role of their MLA, MP in getting them employment. On the issues of atrocities or mistreatment of scheduled caste, nearly 70% of the voters, the respondents, felt that atrocities take place in their locality, and a significant number of them felt that frequency of such incidences are very regular. Every 12th respondent said that incidents were repeated once or twice in a month. However, an overwhelming majority, 81.2%, felt that the response of their MLA MP on these issues when approached was negative. Only 8.5% of the respondents felt that they were satisfied with the political representation of scheduled caste. A good 65% said they are not satisfied, 21% said little satisfied. To a leading question, whether they wanted some change in the political system, a majority of them replied positive. Nearly 50% of the respondents expressed their agreement with the idea of a scheduled caste representative should be elected only by the scheduled caste voters. Among those who opposed this idea, about 72% agreed that the scheduled caste members should compulsorily secure at least 1/3 of the scheduled caste votes in that constituency. Thus, on the whole, out of 177, 135 respondents, 76.27 felt that there should be a change in the electoral system. A further analysis of the relationship between the response of the satisfaction of the respondent, that is the voter, with the performance of scheduled caste representatives against the factors of their performance, raising the issue in the scheduled caste in the assembly, raising the issues related to scheduled caste in the parliament, performance on the issues of basic amenities like education facilities, employment access, response to atrocities of the community of scheduled caste, indicated that the voters felt that the scheduled caste representatives were not representing the interests of the scheduled caste. While seeking a solution as to whether separate electoral method should be used, 66 respondents felt the dependence of the other caste voters was one of the reasons to bring in change in electoral method. Similarly, 88 respondents, that is 49%, felt that qualified joint electorate method seekers found that dependence on other caste voters was a factor. 45% felt that who were not or little satisfied with the present system sought separate electorate. And out of those who rejected separate electorate, 53% sought qualified joint electorate. So there was a very clear division in the opinion of respondents from Punjab and Andhra on the choice of the new electorate method. It is evident that a majority of the respondents that they were not satisfied with the present system of political representation. Out of these, the one from Punjab found qualified joint electorate method, that is a percentage limitation of 35%, while the ones from Andhra Pradesh wanted separate electorate method. But invariably, the majority was not satisfied with the present system and they chose to change in the electoral method. In this way, I have tried today to link the representative character of the elected representatives through reserved constituencies, which was the idea of Baba Saheb Ambedkar, who brought in from 1930s to the point of a unique system in this country where we have former untouchables, scheduled castes getting elected from reserved constituencies, representing themselves in the parliament and assembly on the wider and a very, very important question of the very character of political representation of MLAs and MPs, not only in reserved constituencies, the very representative character of our democracy. I thank the University of Hyderabad, the Vice Chancellor, his team, and I thank everybody here having patiently heard my lecture on a crucial question of this democracy. I thank the University of Hyderabad again for giving me this a very pristine and a very important opportunity for me to speak before you today. Thank you very much.